Because when one thing is developed, made much of, there is the penetration of the various elements. There is the penetration of different elements. There is the analysis of the various elements. Which one thing? Mindfulness of the body. Because when this one thing is developed, made much of, there is the penetration of the various elements. There is the penetration of different elements. There is the analysis of various elements. So we are continuing the Majjhima Nikaya audio notes, and this is still Anguttara Nikaya 577, 579. Then we go to 580, 583. It says, one thing because developed made much of leads to the realization of the fruit of stream entry. And it is important to note that it leads to the realization of the fruit, not to the realization of the actual insight of the stream entry. So this is another sutta that supports pretty much what Satipatthana and Anapanasati suttas already imply, and that is that proper mindfulness can only be done by somebody who's attained to the right view. And if they develop whether mindfulness of body or mindfulness of breathing, they will start to realize the fruit of the stream entry, the fruit of once returning, and so on. And the reason I say it's important to realize is because often people think that simply by doing a meditation technique you attain the understanding of freedom from suffering and so on, which is not the case. And number of suttas would be mentioning that actually. Maybe we can deal with them some other occasion. But so yeah, once a person does get attained to the stream entry through their proper mindfulness of the body, which is the development of the understanding of the stream entry, they start realizing the fruit of the stream entry. Then it says, if the mindfulness of the body is made much of, properly developed, it leads to the realization of the fruit of non-returning, the fruit of arahantship. And yeah, there it is again. The Buddha talks about understanding. It's 584, 599. It says, one thing, as in mindfulness of the body, because developed, made much of, leads to the attainment of understanding, leads to the growth of understanding. So you fully attain the understanding of arahantship, the growth of understanding, the full development of understanding through practicing mindfulness of the body. So again, if something is understood, then means you know that you know it. So it's not an experience that happens to you. It's something that you discern on account of the nature of experience that's pretty much right in front of you. So if you're properly mindful, your own understanding, your own insight into Dhamma and freedom from suffering, insight into Four Noble Truths and so on, gets developed. And in the previous suttas we were reading, you could also see that through the practice of mindfulness of the body, you develop right composure, samadhi, you develop proper samadhi. So basically, proper samadhi then means development of proper understanding. So it's not a surprise that every time the Buddha would finish by saying that things culminate in wisdom and insight and discernment. He wasn't saying that they culminate in some overwhelmingly blissful, pleasurable experience that you can't even explain or put in words. Far from it. Sure, freedom from suffering is very pleasant. It's a huge relief. It's like crossing the desert and not knowing whether you're going to survive or not. And then you survive. Then you feel a tremendous relief. But that's a very different type of pleasure that is usually being valued and sought after in the contemporary Buddhist meditations. So it continues here saying, leads to the full development of understanding, leads to the great understanding, leads to wide understanding, leads to the extensive understanding, leads to deep understanding. leads to the non-local understanding, leads to the broad understanding, leads to the abundance of understanding, leads to the quick understanding, to fast understanding, to speedy understanding, to swift understanding, to sharp understanding, to penetrative understanding. Which one thing? Mindfulness of the body. And then number 600 says, because they do not enjoy the deathless who do not enjoy mindfulness of the body. And by the way, the reason why, well, one of the many reasons why the mindfulness of the body is so wholesome is because if it's done properly, it thoroughly undermines the slightest sense of conceit that a person might be able to entertain otherwise. Because the body is just a random, you could say, a random thing, or a random heap of elements thrown in the world, because of which you know the world as such. Which means that that body has a relationship, the external type of relationship with the world that you can't even conceive, because you're secondary to it. And because of that, your whole existence, your whole experience, mental experience as well, not just bodily, is thoroughly undermined by it. And that's the definition of understanding impermanence. But if you're just trying to attend to the aspects of your body, well, that's all there possible because your body is there in the first place. That's why I keep talking about the peripheral awareness, which is the awareness, the background awareness, which is the awareness, the mindfulness. You don't want to attend it on your own terms, or observing sensations, or feeling like this, or looking at that. That's all possible on the ground of that body being already there, thrown into that world, and you have no say in that. So if you fully dwell on that, as we read in the previous talk, you're going to start experiencing proper existential anxiety. They will then lead to proper understanding of freedom. And you can develop something only once you understand what you're supposed to develop. It doesn't happen to you, it doesn't occur, it doesn't come through the divine providence. It comes through your own effort of understanding. And that's it. And that's why the deathless is enjoyed by those who enjoy mindfulness of the body. Once you fully understand that inherent independence of a heap of the elements upon which your whole life depends, well, you stop appropriating your whole life as my life, as the life I am in control of. It just remains standing there like a palm stump. You stop feeding it with desire and greed and craving and so on. And that is the deathless, relinquishing it all. But you can't relinquish it all willingly, intentionally. Because any intention of a Putujana is on the basis of non-relinquishment. So even if he tries to relinquish things, he's appropriating that act. So you really want to undermine yourself, so to speak. You can't will your way out of enlightenment, but you can certainly set it up, and it will then result in it. And you set it up by seeing that your own will, your own life depends upon things that you cannot will and control. It's inseparable from, it's bound with. It's the definition of sankhara. So when you fully understand those things, discern them as the fundamental reason for you being able to say yes and no and do other things and choose and so on, that's how you disown even your own volition. So then here the suttas continue, 602, 603, 4, just saying deathless is missed by those who mindfulness of the body is missed. They have neglected the deathless, those who have neglected the mindfulness of the body. Deathless has been forgotten by those who forgot mindfulness of the body. Deathless is not practiced by those whom mindfulness of the body is not practiced. Because, okay, it carries on. Deathless is not developed by those whom mindfulness of the body is not developed. Deathless is not discerned by those whom mindfulness of the body is not discerned. Deathless is not fully understood by those for whom mindfulness of the body is not fully understood. Deathless is not realized by those whose mindfulness of the body is not realized. Now there's the excerpt from Samyutta Nikaya 35, and it's 247 sutta. So let's see what it says. Suppose Bhikkhu, a man with wounds on his body, with a festering body, would go into a wood of reeds and kusa thorns would pierce his feet, the leaves of the reeds would scratch his limbs. Thus, because on account of this, the man would experience a huge amount of pain and unhappiness. In just this way, because here a certain bhikkhu who has gone to the village or gone to the forest meets someone who says, "This venerable one is someone who acts like this, who behaves like this, a filthy thorn of the village." Having seen thus, restraint and non-restraint should be seen. And which bhikkhus is non-restrained? Here, because a bhikkhu having seen a sight with the eye inclines towards a pleasing sight. He is troubled by a displeasing sight, and he dwells without mindfulness of the body set up with a limited mind. Limited mind means mind bound to the foreground, mind controlled by the object of their attention. That's what limits it. Unlimited, boundless is the one that realizes the boundless domain of peripheral. So he's troubled by a displeasing sight. Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, many people probably think it's obvious, and in a way it is obvious, but it's one thing to understand it on the theoretical level. Another thing is to actually start discerning the principle that you are living, that you are acting out of. And then principle is inclining towards pleasure makes you liable to pain, and that is the inherent danger of sensuality. Giving into sensuality, where sight, sound, smell, taste, touches, and so on, sensual acts, that is the most direct reason why you are subject to suffering. That's why the Buddha would say, like even those who like followers of other teachings back in the day would sometimes be able to overcome sensuality and the desire towards sensual pleasures, and he would say that they would have abandoned lots of suffering just by doing that, despite all the wrong views that they would still have in regard to the other matters. Overcoming the thirst towards sensual pleasures, it's basically overcoming a huge amount of suffering. And here that's seen on a very subtle level, obviously. So inclining towards a pleasing sight means you will be troubled by a displeasing sight. It won't be a matter of choice. And until that's discerned, the danger in sensuality is not apparent, as the suttas would say. So you don't. There is the inherent danger in sensuality, but you have to see it on its own terms. You have to actually see what it is. Often people's contemplation around sensuality is like you try to fabricate the danger, you try to tell yourself how it's not worthy and so on. And all that is true, but none of that is direct enough to be seen as a principle that can actually genuinely free you from your blind desire towards it. And that direct principle is seeing that it's the welcoming of the pleasure of sensuality. That's why you're liable to pain. So that must be seen presently, simultaneously arisen, that connection, that dependence, that determination. With this is. With inclination towards pleasure, suffering is possible. And possible suffering, it's already unpleasant. The fact that suffering might affect you, that is already troubling you. So he says he dwells without mindfulness of the body set up with a limited mind, because his mind is still bound with the objects of his senses, pleasing or displeasing. His attention controls him, and he does not understand, as it really is, that liberation of mind, liberation of understanding, where those arisen, evil, unwholesome things cease for him without a remainder. Having heard a sound with the ear, smell a smell with the nose, taste a taste with the tongue, touch the touch with the body, imagine a phenomenon with the mind, he inclines towards a pleasing phenomenon, he is troubled by a displeasing phenomenon, he dwells without mindfulness of the body set up with a limited mind. Suppose bhikkhus a man having taken hold of 6 animals with different domains, different feeding grounds, would tie them up with a strong rope. Having taken hold of a snake, he would tie it up with a strong rope. Having taken hold of a crocodile, he would tie it up with a strong rope. Having taken hold of a bird, he would tie it up with a strong rope. Having taken hold of a dog, he would tie it up with a strong rope. Having taken hold of a jackal, he would tie it up with a strong rope. And having taken hold of a monkey, he would tie it up with a strong rope. Having tied them up with a strong rope, having made a knot in the middle, he would release them. Then bhikkhus, those 6 animals with different domains, different feeding ground, would each pull towards its own feeding ground and domain. The snake would pull, I will enter an anthill. Crocodile would say, I will enter the water. Bird would fly up in the sky. Dog would pull, thinking, I will enter the village. Jackal would try to enter the graveyard. And the monkey would pull, I will enter the woods. Because when these 6 animals would be worn out, exhausted, then whichever is the strongest out of the animals, they would submit to it, they would follow it, they would come under its control. In just this way, because for whatever bhikkhu mindfulness of the body is not developed, not made much of, I pulls into the agreeable sides, disagreeable sides are repulsive. Mind pulls, and so on for every sense, and then it says mind pulls into agreeable phenomena, disagreeable phenomena repulsive. In this way, bhikkhus, one is unrestrained. So you could see that even based on this and the previous paragraph I read, even the practice of restraint is not like mindless saying no to everything. I mean, you might have to start like that, but it shouldn't stay at that level. You should certainly not be neurotically afraid of sight, sound, smell, taste, touches. But you want to start discerning. Because it says, you're properly restrained when you're mindful of the body, and when you're mindful of the body, the clear understanding is developed. So if there is no clear understanding of the nature of kusala is kusala and akusala is akusala, there is no mindfulness of the body present, not the proper one at least. And then it says, continues. So, and which bhikkhus is restrained? Here, bhikkhus, a bhikkhu having seen a sight with the eye does not incline towards pleasing sight, is not troubled by the displeasing sight because of that. And he dwells with the mindfulness of the body set up with an immeasurable mind. That's apamana, the Pali word, boundless, immeasurable. And he understands as it really is that liberation of mind, liberation of understanding, where those arisen, evil, unwholesome things cease without a remainder. Having heard a sound with the ear, smell with the nose, and so on, having imagined a phenomenon with the mind, he does not incline towards a pleasing phenomenon, he is not troubled by a displeasing phenomenon, and he dwells with mindfulness of the body set up with an immeasurable mind. He understands as it really is that liberation of mind, liberation of understanding, where those arisen, evil, unwholesome things cease for him without a reminder. So again, he continues with the same simile of tying down the 6 different animals with a strong rope, tying the rope in the middle, and then the animals try to pull towards their respective feeding grounds. But the difference is now with the proper restraint, when those 6 animals become worn out, exhausted, then they just stand next to it. They will just sit down next to it. They will lay down next to the strong stake or post that they've been pinned down with that rope. So just in this way, because for whatever bhikkhu mindfulness of the body is developed, made much of, the eye does not pull into the agreeable sides, disagreeable sides are not repulsive, smell, taste, touch, and so on. And then the mind does not pull into agreeable phenomena. So the strong, the stake, the post to which you tie your senses, is not your determination, is not your point of view, it's not your decision to never engage in these things. It's the presence of the phenomenon of the body there. peripherally established in that background as that object in the world because of which there is the world for you in the first place. The world in this case being the feeding grounds. So you discern that, then you don't have to practice restraint in a sense of you don't have to be pulling these animals back, because you have properly tied them to the post that will make them tired, and then they will have to sit down. So all you have to do is remain mindful of the body properly, and then your restraint is done for you. Oh yeah, well there it is. So the next paragraph says, the mind does not pull into agreeable phenomena. Disagreeable phenomena are not repulsive. In this way, bhikkhu is restrained. And a strong stake or post, this bhikkhus is a designation for mindfulness of the body. Therefore, bhikkhus, you should train in this way. Mindfulness of the body will be developed by us, made much of, made a vehicle, made a ground, carried out, practiced, properly undertaken. In this way, bhikkhus, you should train. So then we have Sangha 43, but maybe there can be part 3 now, because the topic changes. It talks about the undetermined and the path to undetermined, asankata. Okay, so we can maybe do that later.